Hi and welcome back to my follow-up tutorial for CORRIDORKEY. No AI voice this time, so just my very boring German accent. I thought I'd make a follow-up tutorial because there are some things you might run into that are worth addressing and how we can tackle them. I have this example shot here. This is pre-rendered. So just our character walking towards this control panel. And as you can see, it looks quite clean. To be fair, in this case, no long hair, no hair details, so it's a bit easier, but it was the best shot I have to showcase what I'm about to explain. So this is the original shot. And as you can see, we have some trouble here. We have a person overlapping with our talent, which should not be in the shot. And we also have the problem that our talent leaves the green screen, and this needs to be addressed to get a clean key. You can see I already built this shot, but I will recreate it here with you. I made this 1080p composition, but my footage is UHD, so that's why we use the resize. And then I use the color space transform here to go from my Sony S-Log footage to Rec 79 and linear gamma. As in the previous tutorial, this is what CK expects and can work with the best. So if I drag this into the viewer, we are back to 1080p, as you can see here. And you see it's looking quite weird because we are using linear gamma. In this tutorial, I'm actually using Fusion standalone, so I'm not in Resolve, but I'm in Fusion Studio. But the workflow is exactly the same. If you are watching linear gamma, it looks weird, so we need to address that. At the top here, you have this LUT option, and if I go to the drop down here, you can see I can select this Gamut View LUT, and it's activated, and now my picture is normalized. If you want to recreate it, just open the drop down, select the Gamut View LUT, and then go to Edit. And here, leave the source space to no change, and the output space, set it to ITU RBT 709 scene. This will normalize linear gamma to Rec 709, so it's presented here on your screen in a normal matter. Let me start by showing you what the problem is. As we know, we need an alpha hint, so first we would use the delta keyer. So from the color space transform, I go to the delta keyer, put it on the viewer, color pick my green screen, do some quick settings here to get a rough alpha matte. But you can already see our problem. Of course, the delta keyer cannot exclude these elements here. So I still would have to draw masks around it and rotoscope the person to get a clean alpha hint. Otherwise, this will be included in the alpha hint. So not the best or easiest option right now. So instead of using the delta keyer, we are using the magic mask. As I said, I'm using Fusion Studio, so that means it's a paid version. You can actually use the paid version of Fusion Studio if you have a license for DaVinci Resolve Studio. So it works with both programs, in case you didn't know that. But you need the paid version of either Resolve or Fusion Studio to use stuff like the Magic Mask, because it's one of the neural engine tools that are not in the free version. So I create here a Magic Mask, connect it. Now I pick my talent here. And to make sure the magic mask will not include the parts I don't want, I will also minus these areas here where I know I have stuff I don't want to include. And now I will track this mask. So magic mask has been tracked. Let's take a look. And we can see we have a very nice alpha hint for CORRIDORKEY. So I create the CORRIDORKEY node, attach it, and feed the magic mask as our alpha hint. And then let's take a look. Okay, so as we can see, we have added our alpha hint. We get a nice key, but you can also see we have these artifacts all around here. Also, if I go through the video, you can see the person in the background, which is not included in the alpha hint, is actually still included somewhat at the edges here of the key when CORRIDORKEY is processing it. We can try and below advanced and matte cleanup to activate auto despeckle and try to get rid of some of it, but you still can see, especially at the edges here, there are elements left within the key. Just using the alpha hint is not working properly to get rid of all the elements we don't want. That's the problem we have with CORRIDORKEY. The alpha hint is just a suggestion for foreground and background, but CORRIDORKEY still tries to get fine details at the edges, and it will probably include more stuff from the background that you don't actually want in your key. This is what we need to fix. So this part right here did not work as intended. So let's see what we can do about it. To make a bit more room, I will just copy these elements and let's start a new signal chain here. So this is our actual state of the shot at the moment. Now, to make CORRIDORKEY not get confused about these elements we don't want, we can actually trick it into believing it's all on a green screen without these elements by masking out these elements and then putting on top our magic mask cut out from our talent, so we get a cleaner edge. Of course, that means we are adhering to the result of the magic mask in regards of the key we can achieve with CORRIDORKEY. So it's not a perfect solution, but it's better than having all these artifacts. Of course, in my example, like I said, this character here is easier to key because he doesn't have long hair or fine hair details that would probably be left out from magic mask. But to get started, I will create a new magic mask. And this time I will use mode beta. And then we will start adding our character here and telling magic mask to leave out these parts. And then we will track it. Okay, so that is done. Let's take a look. And it looks pretty decent, I would say. But as you can see, we get some artifacting from the background where magic mask thinks it's part of the character and not the background. But we can go to the matte option of magic mask. And then we can use the threshold here, the left point, drag it to the right to get rid of some of the elements here. Just enough so these artifacts start to disappear. And maybe use restore fringe to get some details back, just like that. And this is our foreground now. I will put it on the side here. And we create a merge node. So right now this magic mask is not used, it's just here for later. And now we need to get rid of the background elements we don't want in our shot. To do that, I will create a background node and color pick the color of the green screen, and then I will just add it to the output of the merge node. So the background is now in front of the merge node. If we look at the merge here, we just get the green. And now when the background is selected, we can just add a square window, a rectangle. I will just drag it to the top and make it full width. And then just put it at a place I can get rid of all this. I will also include this little part of the tape here because it was reflecting and it will probably otherwise show up in CK, so I will include this part. And now I just go through the video and see for how long I need it. And I will just animate this position here. So rectangle selected, under center, activate the keyframe, and then go to the later part of the video, around here, and just drag it up until it's leaving the frame. And you can see that should work just fine. And now while the rectangle is selected, I can just add a second rectangle and use that on this part here. And let's take a look. Around here, under center, add a keyframe, move forward, and just drag it out until you don't need it anymore. So if we look at the result now, you can see we have these parts masked out with just green. This might be a bit too bright, so let's just see if we can darken it a bit so this is not such a contrast here. Maybe add some more green back in. You could also try using several backgrounds with masks so it matches better with your green screen, but I think this should be fine. Now, of course, we need our talent to be in front of these fixes. And that's why we have this magic mask here. I can now add the magic mask by dragging it onto the output. And this creates another merge node. And as you can see now, our talent is on top of the green screen. So we eliminated all distracting background objects we don't want in our key. And at this point we can add our corridor key. And use our magic mask as the alpha hint. And as you can see, we get a much nicer key out of corridor key without all the artifacts we had before, because now it really just adds detail to the edges from the green screen. But just like I said, this now relies heavily on the output of the magic mask and the quality it gets. So with long hair details and fine hair details, this might not be as good as we want it to be, because we basically key the footage before we use corridor key, and everything the magic mask did not include cannot be retrieved by a corridor key at this point. So it's a fix, but it's not perfect, just to be aware of that. So at this point I will just copy this part here, that is the CGI background I already had pre-rendered in Unreal Engine, and just drag on the output here. And as you can see, we now have our composite. In my case here, to make the foreground and background match a little bit better, I will add a node after corridor key. Just look for adaptation, and you find the chromatic adaptation. And just switch it to color temperature. And in my case, my footage is a bit too warm. So our reference is 6500 Kelvin. Let's just say my footage was 5000 Kelvin. That should cool it down somewhat, as you can see, to match a bit better. And this might already be enough for you to make this shot work, depending on your image and composite. I just want to add another little tip we can use. In my case, we shot this clip with a higher shutter speed to avoid motion blur during the shoot for a better and cleaner key. In my case, I want to add motion blur back into the image to get rid of this juddery look. So also my Unreal background has been rendered without motion blur. And so I want to add motion blur on top of the whole composite to merge everything back together a little bit nicer. It can also help mask out some edge problems we now have because of our little fix. And to do that, I will use the vector motion blur. So I select the merge node, shift space and then vector and select vector motion blur. But the vector motion blur will not be able to work on its own because it needs motion vectors as an information to know how to blur the image. Let's pick a frame where he is actually moving. And to get the motion vectors, we need another node before the vector motion blur. And that is the optical flow node. So select the merge, shift space, optical flow. Let's just add it in the signal chain. To make it work, we need to connect the optical flow also to the green input. And now we should get motion blur. Here you can clearly see it when I disable these two nodes. Of course, this is a bit too strong, so let's just scale it down to 0.5. And we can also probably get away with using half resolution for the optical flow to save some processing power. You might have noticed that my corridor key node is constantly blinking and seems to be working all the time, even though the shot is already rendered. This is something which might occur from time to time. I assume this will be fixed later on. In most cases, you can just save your comp and it should stop. So at this point, we can now render out this shot into a video file. Just remember, right now we are looking on our composition through this viewing LUT, which normalizes our linear gamma picture into Rec 709. If I switch it off, this is the actual picture right now. So if you would just render out this result, your file would be in linear gamma. This might be a good idea if you want to use this file in, let's say, Resolve after that to do a color grade. You might want to keep all the information in, or if you just want to render this out to watch on your screen, you should add another color space transform at the end here. So adding a CST. And in this case, it's already set to Rec 709 linear as input, which is correct. And in my case, I just want to output it to Rec 709 gamma. And you get the same picture as with the viewing LUT before, but now it is burnt into the picture. At this point, you can just add a saver node. So my shot.mof in my case, save, and under format, in my case Apple ProRes 422 LT would be fine. And now you can just hit render and start the rendering process of your shot. And as you can see, we don't get any artifacts around his head where the green screen was missing. Also this part right here, no artifacts because of the person sitting here. So let's just get back to our reference shot. And you can see we get quite a nice result. Alright, that's it. I hope this is helpful and gives you some ideas on how to trick CK into producing clean keys with difficult footage. Until then, bye bye.